Hey guys, so I just started recording two different 40 plus minute videos. I think one was like 53 minutes and the other one was 43 minutes. But the video audio quality was awful. I actually really hated it, and I tried for like 4 hours in Audacity to fix it for the first one, and the second one I recorded, I forgot to test if the audio was fixed, and it wasn't. So I didn't do anything to fix it this time. It just fixed itself, I guess, as I've currently been listening to it. But we'll see how it goes. Okay. Welcome to my Dark Masters control profile, is what we're kind of calling it. It's not really like a control list, but it can be a control list. It's like a weird like middle ground, but we'll kind of explain. We're going to kind of go over the theory of the deck, kind of what you want to be doing with it. Then we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the matchups you'll run into in bt16 that kind of give you some trouble or some pause. There's no real matchup that you just full curb stomp. There are matchups you're favored in, but a lot of it comes down to like your skill in piloting the deck and kind of understanding what your opponent wants to do, which is something I really enjoy. So I think it's going to really test that portion of your skill set. And then we'll kind of talk about other options you can play in this deck. I think there's a good amount of different lower end that you can play, and I've tested out some insane top end. So, yeah, we'll see. Starting off with the eggs, we're playing Full Mother D-Reaper. The D-Reapers are really nice. They act exactly kind of how we want them to act. We don't play any rookies in this deck, so it allows us to hatch and then on the turn after promote and then delete it, which gives us a huge boon when it comes to like keeping certain value cards in play without having to delete them to continue getting more value, which comes up a lot. On average, you'll hatch 1 to 3 times, depending on what your hand looks like and the kind of a deck your opponent is playing. But we play 4 anyways, just in case. Up next, we'll show you the first 8 cards, because they both function the exact same. The only difference is the colors and the way that kind of interacts with the deck, and I guess they're inheritables too. They both have the same on play and end of turn. On play, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, add 2 level 6 or higher cards from among them to your hand, and then return the rest to the bottom of the deck. And then your end of turn by deleting one of your Digimon. You can also delete this one. You may play 1 Digimon card with the Dark Master's trait from your hand to an empty space in your breeding area without paying the cost. So if you do hatch on your turn 1, you can't, unfortunately, delete this guy and then go from there. The colors of this deck are really important. Black and purple allow you the most access as well as the most powerful access. So that's why we're only playing one of these, one of each of these, rather than playing the Cherrymon and Scorpiomon as well. Their inheritables are slightly different. This one gives retaliation, this one gives reboot. The blue ones give blocker, and the green ones give piercing, and that'll continue on for the remainder of the lines up into their level 6s. And give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I just had to go double check the audio again. I can't stay sane if I do another 40 plus minute video and then have the audio gets destroyed. I will actually lose my mind. Going into the next set of level 5s here, we've got Wisemon. Wisemon is a searcher as well. The Digivolves for 4, doesn't matter. A place cost is 6, which is the same as these. The on-play is a on-play with Digivolve and reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Add 1 purple or 1 black Digimon card from among them to your hand. Place the rest at the bottom or the top of your deck in any order, which comes up a good amount. Sometimes you'll be looking for cards that aren't purple or black, and so even though you won't add them, typically when you play this guy for 6, you're passing turn, unsurprisingly, and so being able to stack a card that you couldn't have searched but still wanted to the top of your deck so that way you draw it for your turn still feels really good. He's purple and black, which makes him the most valuable single body on field, as well as he has the best inheritable being blocker. A lot of your aces don't come with blocker built into them, so being able to blast Digivolve, get a really strong effect, and then block with a 12k body feels fantastic. That's why we run him at 4. He can also search out your other searchers or other value level 5s that really come in handy. Up next, we've got 3, and the last 3 of our level 5s being EX5 Edelman. This card is really good. Get your copies of him now. A lot of decks, especially ones that play Valkyrieman, like Nume, will be playing this card. This is going to be something that I think we'll be seeing a lot of come the current format, or bt16, the future format. It has a on-play when Digivolving. Until the end of your opponent's turn, one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 3k DP, and at the start of your main phase, that Digimon attacks. It's like a Cordramon or Slayerdramon from Examon, or a Laplace Demon. It has the inheritable of opponent's turn when an opponent attacks. You can reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, play a level 3 black or yellow Digimon that won't hit, but then you trash the rest, and that can kind of come up. Especially if you're trying to hit some things before going into like a Zwart, but we'll kind of explain what's going on there in a little bit. It's not a mandatory effect, so you don't have to use it. And if you do ace on top of this guy, the attack that you ace affected with, the inheritable wasn't online when they attacked it, so it won't trigger, but if they do attack from that point forward, it will trigger, and you may mill. This Edelman is, I think, probably the most impactful Digimon of all of your level 5s towards like the mid and late game. I think he is super, super valuable, and he gets around like the Magna X protection, forces like your ace effects to proc actually, and is useful against every matchup except for probably Lugamon, and then definitely Mirage, but we'll go into that. Up next is our Dark Masters package. We're playing 4-3-2-1. I didn't plan that. It kind of just how it worked out. I didn't realize that until the second recording. I didn't even realize that in my first recording, which is funny. Black and purple, again, most important colors in this deck. And then blue-green. Blue comes up. We're gonna get that again. They all work the same. They can't be Digivolved on top of during your turn unless it's a white Digimon. They all have a on-play when attacking, which is Digivolve 2, delete and unsuspended, bounce at level 5, bottom deck as suspended. And then they all have the same inheritables as mentioned. And then they all have the end of turn, delete this Digimon, end of your opponent's turn, specifically, delete this Digimon, which is a mandatory effect that you cannot escape from. And then you may play out one Digimon card with Dark Masters trait, other than that specific Digimon. So if it's Piedmon, you can play out the other 3. You just can't play out another Piedmon, Machinedramon, so on and so forth. We play 4 and 3. Best colors, most important, most impactful. I think best effect, probably second best effect. The Puppetmon seems like it'd be really good, but it's only really good if your opponent doesn't know it's coming. If they do, they won't suspend. Whereas the Piedmon, even though it only deletes unsuspended, because we're such an ace-focused deck, they have to delete our level 5s before attacking or during their when attacking effects. So this, in a way, kind of like incentivizes them to trigger our aces for us. And if they don't, I mean, Piedmon will come out and then it'll delete their body itself. The Metal Seedramon is okay. It's not bad. It's not amazing. There's not much they can do to really play around it, but it's also not super backbreaking. The Machinedramon is really, really strong. The Digivolve 2 is a wonderful effect. If only there were more cards that did that. I wonder if we'll see more of those coming forward. Anyways, next up, oh my god, what the hell? Another copy of 4 cards that Digivolve twice with upside. Who could have seen this coming? Yes, Vikemon is a new card in BT16. It's very, very strong, and it turns certain unwinnable matchups for us into, I feel like, favored matchups for us. On play, when Digivolving, Digivolve to one of your opponent's suspended Digimon, then one of your opponent's Digimon with one or fewer Digivolution sources can't attack, or can't suspend. Can't suspend. That's a very specific keyword, and is super important, unironically. And then has the when attacking, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with one or fewer Digivolution cards. Something to keep in note, this is anti-synergy with Edamon if you are targeting a level 4 or 5 that kind of just like played out. I've almost lost games because of that, and that's something you should really keep in mind, that this card is a blanket effect and can fuck you. But it does get around like Black God Omanes or Bushi Agumon, or cards that kind of just like want to rush out and kill you. Adds a very nice layer of protection there. It also affects Alliance. Your opponent can't Alliance when the Digimon comes into play, which is hilarious. And even if they out him, they still can't Alliance for that turn. If they have any Vmons in play, they have to go on top of them twice with Magnamons or a Magna into Zudo to actually swing with them. Huge backbreaker against a lot of decks. Numemon getting rid of their on deletions. Super good. And then the removal is honestly completely unnecessary that they gave this card even more upside. And then it being black 7 cost. Oof. These aces are insane. Speaking of insane aces, one that's not quite as good, but still has a good niche in my opinion. On play, when attacking, Grand Kuwagamon will suspend 2 of your opponent's Digimon or Tamers, and then the cards that were suspended by this effect don't unsuspend during their unsuspend phase, which is nice. That adds like a nice layer of defense. And then you may delete one of your opponent's suspended Tamers. Note the Tamer has to be suspended, so if they don't have a suspended Tamer, you will have to use the Grand Kuwagamon effect to suspend one of them, meaning you can only suspend one card defensively. But popping Tamers comes up in a lot of matchups, actually. Popping Davises, popping the Dual Tamer, popping TKs, all of those cards are really good. Even popping a Thomas here and there feels pretty good. Marcus's and AGs feel a little worse depending on what your opponent's board looks like. If they don't have a Lugamon in the mono purple Lugamon in the back, popping an AG can be backbreaking. Popping a Marcus if they don't have a Rise in play can also be really hurtful for them. But I think where this card shines a little bit more is the fact that it's your turn when the Digimon becomes suspended. You can give one of your Digimon security attack +1, including this card. So minimum, it's a double checker that usually you Digivolve for free, or you get out from trash for free. And then if you have a card like Mega Gargo, that turns it into a quad checker, plus this card's 1 check, meaning you'll check all 5 security. If you have a Zort in play, that's a 15k body that checks twice, pretty much going to do both checks every time. It feels really good there. So yeah, I thought about cutting this card down by 1, just because it feels in a lot of matchups, especially I think our harder matchups, but I'm not sure what I would add in its place. So right now I'm kind of just keeping it at 3. Moving on to another set of aces, Mega Gargo Ace. This card's really good. This is, I think, the card that we Digivolve on our turn the second most or the most. It's kind of tied, but we'll get there when we get there. On play, when Digivolving, suspend 2 of your opponent's Digimon or Tamers, then 2 of their Digimon or Tamers can't unsuspend or Digivolve until the end of their turn. This is a very proactive play. It can be used defensively. It has the when Digivolving end of attack effect. You may unsuspend this Digimon. So again, by itself, it is a minimum 2 checker. With the Grand Kuwagamon, it now checks for 4, which is really good. It also has blocker and reboot as just its body. It just does that. It has no on-play effect, which is a little bit sad. But I think if it was a when Digivolving on-play effect, this card would probably be limited, if not banned at this point, just because, God, being able to just 7 stun your opponent. Typically, when you would play this card for 7, your opponent would probably have 1, maybe 2 bodies on field, and now both those bodies are now completely useless to them. Feels fantastic. So I think that would be broken, but I could, I can wish, I can dream. It's black, level 7, 7 cost, so you can get it out for free. We'll go over that again. I keep mentioning it. There's no point. Just keep in mind, 8 or less, black and purple. Keep that in mind, lads. We'll kind of get there when we get there. Next up is the card that kind of, I think most people don't play in this deck, but I think it's disgustingly powerful. And as a new Numamon player, I've kind of awoken. I've ascended beyond. Like, I'm gonna check the audio one more time because I'm a little anxious about it. So give me a second. All right, gang, I'm back. What's up? Valkyrie Ace, Valkyrie Mana Ace. Whew. Okay. On play, when evolving, you will Revelation of Light your opponent, or Ruin Mode your opponent, depending on the turn you're on. If it's Revelation of Light, then it's it'll be your turn effect. Whereas if it's a Ruin Mode, it's on their turn. It's just a worse version of both of those cards, which still puts it, I think, in one of the best cards ever printed. It's attached to a body. It digivolves for free. Minus 5k. Gosh, this card is insane. I hope they didn't give it a really good secondary effect. All turns, once per turn, when a card is removed from a security stack, delete one of your opponent's 8k Digimon or lower. Oh, that's not that very good. I guess the minus 5k puts a lot of Digimon into that threshold. Anything 13k or less, but it's fine, probably. I just want check security. Or I want check security with a Digimon that would, obviously die to that effect. Oh, it's any Digimon. Oh, my bad. Well, it doesn't seem that great. There's a second line here. If this effect didn't delete a Digimon, this Digimon gets security attack +1 until the end of your turn? Oh, well, that's strange. It's an all turns effect. So if they swing into me and I don't get deleted, this gets +1, and then they swing into me, the Valk, that's another +1. So that's 3 checks here. And it's red. There's no shot. There's like a weird little synergy they have with like a Blitz Digimon or anything that would then check 5 security in a single turn. No, there's no shot that actually happens, for sure. The Valkyrie, sorry, enough jokes. The Valkyrie also has an insane synergy with the Edamon. Edamon guaranteeing they'll swing into the Valk. You clear most boards. And that's not a hyperbole. Partition doesn't save them if you're playing Imperial, because your Imperial Digimon will die to the deletion effect of the Valk, and then your Partition Digimon will die to the minus 5k DP. The Magnet X is forced to swing in. The Valk itself won't do anything because it won't actually delete the Magnamon, and then they'll check, and then they'll unsuspend and be unaffected before the Valk will do the deletion, because it's on their turn. But still wiping out their Vmons is really, really good. And if you use the Edamon and went into a a Vikemon instead, that does get around it. The Edamon handles most things for us with the Valk and the Vike combos here. Even Mega Gargo is really good with the Edamon. This card is a house against, I think, most matchups, which feels disgusting. The Valk can be placed underneath the Apocalypse, which also comes up a lot. You're just hard playing it for 7 early. Forcing your opponent to get Ruin Mode affected, even if it's not during their turn and just during ours, I think it still deal with a good amount of their board. If your opponent's say for example Numamon, and then they play for 3 after placing a rookie in the back, putting them to 4 with a Valk, we still end up with minimum a double checker, and if they ended up swinging, we'll clear some of their board again, or if they don't have anything on their board to clear anymore, this is 3 checks plus a another card in our deck, which may or may not be there, is 5 checks. It's very hard to deal with. Moving on to our last 2 ace cards. Metal Garurumon Ace. This is the one that we digivolve, I think, probably the most on our turn. I think it would be for sure the most if we had more copies of it in the deck. And I've considered taking out a Grand Kuwagamon and putting it on a Mega Ace. My body rejects it every time I want to. I'm not sure why. This card is a free level 6 on top of any purple level 5. So the Y is in the Lady Debbie, which is super, super nice. And it helps set up your trash by pitching certain level 5s or aces, which then lets you go into one of your powerful level 7s. And this can be as early as your turn 2, which feels really, really good. Getting that powerful level 7, which is right up next. Don't worry, I'm sorry for teasing you all for so long. He's coming. The biggest threat, the card that holds us all together, and the card that makes Melga really good is coming. But assuming, let's say, we put our opponent to 6, and we have a Lady Debbie that we play out, we search the top 4, we add 2 cards, and we're chilling. Well, we're playing against Magnamon, and they don't have the option, they digivolve for 5. Now that card's completely unaffected. If we ace into anything, it doesn't really feel that great, because you're not getting actually an insane amount of value. So you'd be trying to delete the cards around him, not really the Magna X himself, and you're kind of let him run his course and resolve whatever he kind of wants to resolve there. Well, and then they swing, they're going to get their check off. If you metal here, that's actually one of the few matchups where metal's ace effect comes up a lot. Cheating out your opponent's turn, preventing them from getting that double swing from their Magna X, and then setting up a really powerful board on their next turn, where if you Edamon them, well, now they're going to swing into you, and if you digivolve on top of a Wise here, well, you're big enough to block the Magna X, which is really huge, and is something that I think should be considered a lot. Kind of going forward, I think that as decks become more memory efficient, stealing memory from them actually comes up a lot. It comes up against Fenrir too, surprisingly, if you don't end up having a Vikemon in hand, just kind of putting them over that like 1, 2 memory, 3 memory threshold from the 2 that they will usually keep themselves at pretty comfortably until they're willing to pass turn, will leave you stealing them in a really unfortunate predicament, especially if they're swinging with their Soul Lugar, and then they're like, well, I can't keep turn if I just hard digivolve. So they swing, they digivolve by pitching, and then they gain back like some amount of memory, usually 2 to 3. I mean, you can then immediately steal back turn, and now you have a way to deal with, or at least you can start attempting to deal with their Fenrir, which feels really good. Up next, as mentioned, the king, our Lord and Savior, Omnimon Zord. Digivolves on top of a black or purple. As mentioned before, this is kind of where it's all been leading for 6. When digivolving, you trash top 3 cards of your deck, and then you may play up to 2 play cost 8 or less black or purple Digimon cards from your trash without paying the cost. Well, let's just kind of go over what our options are. Starting from the bottom, we've got Searchers that play out Dark Masters. That's great. Wisemons, a lot of defense and more targeted searching. Edamons, forcing them to proc the aces going forward. That feels really good. Dark Masters aren't super... you can just hard play out 2 Vikes, or a Vike and a Grand Kuraga, or a Grand Kuwaga and a Gargo Ace, or, I mean, if you're feeling desperate, maybe even a Metal Garurumon Ace. And it's so strange that they're purple and black and black. It's almost like if you have 2 Zords in hand, your Zord can just immediately set up for another Zord while getting out 2 powerful Ace on-play effects, essentially getting a level 7 and 2 level 6s for 6 memory. Wow, it's really good. Even just playing out the Searchers feels super powerful. Playing out an Edamon plus any Searcher, including like a Wisemon and Edamon, is like a disgusting combo. If you have a Vikemon in hand, forcing them to swing in, Vikemon, then Vikemon blocks. it's so good. This card, seeing it and not seeing it in the deck, I think are night and day. Luckily for us, it's searchable. In archetype searchable, we have 8 cards that search for it, and then another 4 that kind of tangentially search for it, where if we don't see it, we can bottom deck the cards, and if we do see it, we can just place it back on top, and then next turn we'll draw it. It's super, super good. I really like it a lot. I think without this card, this deck kind of falls a little flat. I like this card so much that I'm going to buy the $10 alt arts for it. It's super good. And depending on how fucking expensive the deck is going to be, I'm going to try and get the alt arts for it. But I'm expecting these cards to be $20-$30, and I don't even want to know what the Valkyrie mons are going to look like. But I also play Numamon, so, we'll see. We'll see. Anyways, up next. What? Oh my god. How'd he get in here? That's crazy. Red, blue. So strange. He's white too, so you can just Metal Seedermon swing for game with the Omni, Valk check for 2, maybe 3, swing for game with Omni, Valk check for 2 or 3, and then Omnimon check for another 2 or 3. Yeah, really good, really good. Lethal card. Your opponent is never expecting you to kill them as quickly as this deck can. This deck can kill on turn 2. Obviously, depending on memory. Realistically, you're never killing on turn 2, but you can. Here's a scenario that will never happen, but can theoretically happen. Alright, so you play out an Edamon for 7, okay, and then they play out a fucking level 3, really cheap yellow level 3, and then they 1 cost option to digivolve into a champion, 1 cost option to digivolve into an ultimate, 1 cost option to digivolve into their Mega Mitamamon. Mitamamon will play out a fucking 7 cost or a really cheap level 4 with, for some reason, 8k DP. They swing in, your Edamon will proc, but you will then play out the fucking Valk. Your Valk, for some reason, doesn't delete because they're immune to DP reduction or some fucking stupid shit like that. It doesn't matter, alright? The idea is you can kill on your turn 2. It's nigh impossible. Do you know what's not impossible? Killing on your turn 3. Consistently killing on turn 3 is something that is a lot more likely, feasible, and is something you should be worried about when playing against this deck. If you let them set up. Again, we are a tempo-based deck. If you are not interacting with our board in a meaningful way, we will kill you, and there's not much you can do about that. Apocalypse. Speaking of cards that your opponent probably isn't expecting, but is expecting. Let me kind of explain that. This card plays on such a different axis than the rest of the deck. It is a control style card, but if this card ever procs 3 times, you've won the game. Twice is backbreaking, once is manageable, but still hurts. Milling 8 cards for 3 memory, passing your opponent to 1, rough. Getting an ace effect on top of that, whew, depending on the ace and your opponent, it is devastating. If they can't deal with it, which, to be fair, they are incentivized because we will be probably putting aces underneath, so even when they deal with it, they will be getting memory back. But having blocker, reboot, piercing, retaliation, or some combination of those 3, ideally blocker always. If they can't deal with it, milling 18 cards total now as you pass back, getting another ace effect while doing other things. This is not the only thing that we will be doing. Unlike Apocalypse, where they just focused on doing the Apocalypse thing, we will always be doing other stuff while this guy is kind of just here as a 15k body, maybe checking, maybe deleting your guys, kind of just doing his own thing. You have to get rid of him. And there's no clean way to do it other than just having Judgment for 3. All 3 going into this guy. Again, our board's right here. This guy's doing his own thing. Okay, Crimson Blazing does not affect him. Single target deletion is usually the best bet of getting rid of our Apocalypse, and that does not deal with the rest of the threats that we are currently accruing. This guy is 3 memory when we play him. He will never be more than that unless we are obscenely desperate. So, if you don't have a way to clear him plus extra, you're in a very dire straits. And if he ever goes off 3 times, 8, 10, 12, 30 cards gone. You have 5 cards in hand, 5 cards in security, 30 cards in trash. Over the course of 3 turns, you have digivolved, who knows how many times, we'll say 0 to be kind. You've minimum drawn 3. Because I couldn't got this on my turn 3, or turn 1, but we'll see I did. We'll see I went first, played this guy, etc, etc. Got everything going. Minus 30, you have 10 cards in deck. Minus 3, you drew 7. You're dead next turn if he gets 1 more off. You have to deal with all of this while still dealing with this. This gets better, by the way. As more cards come out, as the next couple sets come out, we have ways to recur him into our deck again. It is so rough going forward, dealing with this man. Seeing him early doesn't matter. Seeing him mid or late, that's when he kind of started popping off. Placing a Valk underneath, getting minus 5k. Zwart, super good. Grand Kuagamon can even come up every once in a while. Just getting a on-play Puppet or on-play Bounce level 5, on-play DD12 2, on-play a Delete Unsuspended. Like, all those are really good. Guess what also is really good? Another Edamon. My goodness. Dude. It's so disgusting how versatile this card is and how it sets up lethal over the course of 4 turns, but it really, really will kill you in 3. Even if you aren't dead yet, you're dead by then. And then moving past... Sorry, I was too busy fucking glazing a Pokemon. Moving past that guy into our Tamers, we've got 4 Analog and a Digimon Emperor. I'm not sure what I want to do with this card. There's not too many other cards I want to play in this spot. And I kind of want to play another one, and I kind of want to cut this guy at the same time, if that makes sense. Ugamon's really prevalent in the meta, but I'm not too impressed with him. He feels a little bricky sometimes, and then cheating out that extra 2 memory does come out a lot, actually. But I'm not completely sold. But if anyone has any ideas, please let me know in the comments. Putting this guy away, I would play 10 Analog use. This card's insane. 2 memory. Search top 3, add 1 trash, 2. Because, I mean, realistically, you're going to be hitting primarily Digimon in this deck. I mean, you have 5 Tamers, and the rest of them right here, the remaining 45 are Digimon. You'll be consistently hitting 3, even if you don't. Who cares if you trash an Analog or Digimon Emperor every once in a while. Setting up your trash is really nice. Setting up your hand is really nice. And you'd think that's like the main thing he's here for. Which you'd be right, kind of. As you play with this card, you realize the ideal deletion target for your guys that you play off of the Zwart. If you play out a Lady Devi and something else, the ideal deletion target of your Lady Devi isn't the other searcher typically, because you want level 5, and if you played out an ace, it's typically not the ace either. Giving your opponent 6 and then giving them another 4 off the ace deletion, that doesn't seem very smart. What's the next ideal deletion target? Oh, it's a Zwart. Oh, Zwart has a source underneath it, and he's a level 5 or higher. Let me just suspend this Analog, and then this Analog, and then this Analog, and then this Analog. Every Analog youth you are able to hit in security or play out, because there are only 2 memories, so typically you'll be able to keep turn, and if you can't, passing your opponent cheaply feels really good in this deck, especially mid or late game. It really gives you so much extra value. It turns a 6-cost Evo down to a 2-cost Evo at most, while still getting a level 6 in the back, 2 bodies on field, some of which will search, some of which will force your opponent to a swing, and some of which just have really powerful effects. And then you can just do it again next turn. Analog youthing, deleting the Zwart you do on top of this guy, getting more value on board consistently. It's so powerful. This deck synergizes so surprisingly well with each other. It's actually insane how well each card here kind of facilitates another card in the deck to do its job, but better. It's beautiful. It really is. And even if your opponent ends up deleting one of your aces, typically you'll have aced. You'll have blast digivolved that person with said ace, getting the bonus effects going already. So you get the bonus effect going of, like, say, a Vike, or in this case it'd be a Grand Kawagamon or a Metal Garurumon. You steal 3 memory, and then your opponent deletes your guy. They get back 4, which sucks, but then you suspend your analog use, so it's like they stole nothing from you. And obviously 4 analog use is a hyperbole. You may be surprised, because again, this falls into the Wisemon category of cards that are pseudo-searchable, where you Wisemon and you can just keep the analog youth on top, making it so that way you're guaranteed to draw him next turn, while still adding a card from the top 3 anyways, which comes up a lot. Playing analog youth for your turn 1, just 2 memory, hatch, put your opponent at 2. They may just not know what you're on, because again, this deck is kind of a hodgepodge. But yeah, so good. So very good. Time to talk about the bad. Alright, let's talk about matchups. I think the biggest negative about this deck is that there's no huge stomp against any deck in the current bt16 format, at least to my knowledge. I think most decks have gotten ways to deal with a 6k DP threshold, or cards with no sources underneath them, which kind of segues really well into the theory of the deck, which we'll go over before we can kind of continue the matchups. This deck is a tempo-based archetype. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in this version of the video. I know I mentioned it in one of the prior ones. But this deck is a tempo-based archetype that requires you to consistently stick level 5s on the field in order to do it. And the cutoff point is 2. I think 2 is the minimum to comfortably stick. 3 is a guaranteed point. Once you have 3 level 5s on the field at any given point, there's only, I don't think there's a single in-archetype card. A card that a deck will play in archetype that's like searchable, that they play because, you know, that's what their deck wants to do, that handles a board of 3 level 5s. There are a couple out of archetype cards, like Crimson Blaze, which is really backbreaking against our deck, or Heaven's Judgment, which can really hurt, again, if they have 3 colors, or 2 colors plus the Heaven Judgment itself, which is what most Heaven Judgment decks will be playing. They'll get to delete all 3, so it doesn't really matter too much. But other than like those like tech cards, which sometimes your opponents will just have, and it'll feel really bad, and you can take some time to play around them to an extent, depending on the deck you're playing against. There's not much you can do about them having them if you play into them, and that's like what it is. But 3 is the cutoff, and the reason for that is because the matchups you'll typically run into. So we'll talk a little bit about them now that we've told you guys this is a surprisingly a very tempo-based archetype rather than a more control-style archetype. The matchups that I think you'll be seeing the most of are Magdamon X, Armor Vaccine, Nuemon, Lugamon, Mirage, Tyrant, maybe Red Hybrid, maybe like Uko Rush, and those are the ones that immediately come to mind. I'm trying to think if there's any others. Maybe Lilith Loop. Other than those 9, I can't think of any other like immediate threats. I think I said Mirage. I'm assuming I said Mirage. And we don't have any like guaranteed win against any of those. I think most of those we have like a 55% chance to win against, which feels really bad. But I think that comes from the fact that this deck is really hard to pilot. A lot of the times, placing the right Dark Masters in the back, so that way you have either access to Zwart, or you have access to like a Blitz, or you have access to their on deletion on their turn, because you know they probably can't answer a very specific level 6 at this time, and so getting the on play and when attacking of a Piedmon or a Puppetmon or Machinedramon is like game breaking, game breaking for them at the moment. Knowing when to Zwart, when not to Zwart, knowing what your opponent kind of wants to do, and like very niche rulings, like the fact that you can't alliance when you Vikemon because you can't suspend Digimon with less than one source, so even if they Digivolve on top of that guy, they have to Digivolve on top of him again to actually get there. There's a whole host of things, or the fact that like Magdamon's unaffected only protects it from the effect that you put on it during the turns that's unaffected, and the moment it's not affected, if that effect still would be there, it's now affected by it. It's like there's a whole host of really, I think, more niche rulings that you have to know to understand how to play against certain decks and play to the win cons that you have available to you. On the bright side, I know I'm dooming a little bit, very few decks I think are unwinnable matchups. In fact, I can only think of one right now that feels unwinnable, and that's Mirage. Mirage is really good against our deck. We search consistently, which means we're adding cards by effect. Our hand is huge typically. I think I've had upwards of like 15 to 20 cards in my hand at any given point, which is backbreaking. Deleting their Thomases is annoying, but it isn't game breaking for them. And they typically try to want to kill you in a single turn with a jamming Digimon that attacks 6 times. That's rough. There's not much we can really do about that, considering that they also have some of the best bouncing mechanics in the game, which also get around our way of trying to mitigate some of that with the analog. Bouncing an ace after stripping its source gives them 4 extra memory. Bouncing a level 5 before it can ace. Edamon won't get too much value because by the time they're kind of out there, we're not really in a salvageable position anymore, which is super unfortunate. But I mean, there's a couple ways that we can kind of like eke out a couple percents here and there. So I'd probably put that matchup like 30% in our favor, 70% in their favor. But that is the worst matchup for us by and large. Other matchups that seem like to be difficult, Fenrir can't kill us in a single turn. They have to kind of chip us down because Vikemon is really oppressive. Red Hybrid, they have to delete our 6k bodies consistently, which means they're very reliant on Crimson Blaze to actually do so. The Magna X protection doesn't protect it from us 9 out of 10 times, which is fantastic. Numamon, while can be very aggressive and very good at removing your board, it requires them to see very specific pieces to do so. And if they don't see those pieces, then I think it's just a fucking pub stomp for them. We just demolish them. It is not close with the amount of Digivolve and like weird niche effects to kind of get around blocker and deletion. And what I'm trying to say is that if you understand your spot in the meta, you will be able to efficiently and I think quite effectively deal with the decks that you will see most often. Moving on to other options that you can play, there is a different base that you can play. Typically you would take out these Melody Reapers and you'd put in 4 the Demi Marimon that pitch, I think, up to level 5 or higher on deletion to draw 2, which helps you set up your trash, which is really nice, and lets you cycle. And then you would play 4 of the searching Ukomon, which lets you search, obviously, some amount of the memory gain Ukomon, and then some amount of Fascomon, which are the on deletion draw 1, trash 1. And that lets you get huge value off of the bodies that you kind of want to be promoting. Being able to delete them off of the Gigadramon or the Devi effect, placing a guy in the back, and then getting a on deletion effect, and then maybe an extra on deletion effect is really good. And these ones also will either gain you memory or will search you 3, and they don't have to hatch. The hatching is not mandatory. It is just something that is possible to do. It also lets you get a couple extra checks in really early, helping you with your aggression. I haven't played with that engine, so everything I'm about to say from here on out is purely theoretical and kind of what I thought when I first saw someone playing it. It has topped, though, in the OCG, so that's something that you should keep in mind. My current issue with that is that they take cards in the main deck, meaning that you have less options to kind of work around what your opponent will want to do, which may not be a bad thing. To clarify, maybe you already have enough options in the deck already with like the different kinds of aces that you want to accomplish, that you don't need such a wide variety. But they still take up cards in your hand, and they also take up cards in your deck when it comes to searching, meaning your searching becomes even a little bit less consistent, but they make up by being consistency cards themselves. They're bricks in your hand. If you want to do a Dark Masters play, I think it makes the deck that's already kind of difficult to pilot even more difficult / inconsistent. Because now you're constantly caught at an in-between of, well, I have these rookies in hand that I want to Digivolve in the back to push out, to get value out of, whereas here, I also have Dark Masters that I want to put in the back to push out, to get value out of. And I can't imagine a rookie with an on deletion ever beating out a Zwart, so I think they're only ever going to be used in scenarios where you need the Zwart. But the problem with that is if you hatch a card and then Digivolve on top of it, you then have to promote the next turn, so you can't immediately kind of get things going, and you have to know before the turn begins what you want to do after your first draw, because maybe something does change. Let's say you hatch, you Ukumon, and then you play out a Searcher, you reveal a top 4, and then you're like, oh, damn, I would have actually deleted the Searcher, because now in this top 4 I did find a Dark Masters, and I would just have put it in the back and then gone into the Zwart, and that would have just been better. Whereas with me, it's like, oh, I mean, I could hatch the Mother D Reaper to get like a little bit of extra value here and there, but it's actually not super mandatory. And I think it's more likely that I hit a Dark Masters off the top than not. And so let's assume that play is done the same now, where we both don't hatch, and then we both just play the Searcher, and we both don't find a Dark Masters. Well, now I'm like, oh, I mean, I didn't have a guy in the back anyways, so it doesn't matter really at all what happens here, so I'm kind of just chilling. And plus, if I have like an Analog Youth here and I ace and then I delete it, I mean, I can still at least hatch this guy and then promote him next turn, which is super nice. Whereas if you're playing the basic eggs and then you don't hatch them, even if you Analog Youth the next turn, you still need to Digivolve and then wait for another full turn before you can actually promote them, preventing you from once again getting the effect of the guys going. And I don't believe Analog Youth is MA. You gain one memory, then hatch. So yeah, it's a mandatory effect. You will be forced to hatch every single time if you have an open space there and enough eggs, which can come up in turn, preventing you from placing a Dark Masters in the back. That's just my initial thoughts. I'm not saying it's worse. I'm just saying I can see some potential problems with the way that it runs with the current engine that I'm at least running, and you may have to kind of tweak the deck to work more around that. Other cards that you can play as like a closer bottom end is you can actually play the Cherrymon and the Scorpiomon, the blue and green Dark Master Searcher cards, and those kind of come up a little bit. They work tangentially well. Vikemon can Digivolve on the Scorpio, and the Grand Koaga Ace and the Mega Gargo Ace can Digivolve on top of the Cherry, and they give you pretty good value. My current issue with those cards is they cost 6, which you're like, oh, well, I mean, so do all of your other level 5s. What's the issue with those? The thing is, if my opponent deletes that level 5 they end up in trash, which is fine. That's where I kind of want them to be a lot of the time. And if he deletes himself, placing a Dark Masters here, and he ends up in trash, that's even better. Because then if I promote the Dark Masters, I go into a Zwart, I mill 3. If I hit another one, fantastic. If I don't, then I always, at minimum, get 1 Searcher back plus a Zwart, which is fantastic. If I don't mill anything, like I did in this scenario, but I was a Scorpio or a Cherrymon here, they can't be played out by the Zwart. Zwart only plays out black and purple Digimon. The blue and green Cherry and Scorpio Mons cannot be played out. So I used 6 memory to play out a worse Gigadramon and Lady Devi that doesn't synergize with my deck in the same way, other than just being a card that searches my top 4 and then adds up to 2, which, again, can be really good, but can still kind of be a bit clunky in the way they work out. And while 6 memory early doesn't really matter, 6 memory mid or late can hurt a lot, and even 6 memory early can still be devastating depending on your opponent's hand and the deck they are playing. If you're not getting as much value out of every single card in your deck that you can, I feel like you start losing what gives this deck its current advantages. Moving on to the top end that I've seen some people play, or that, let me rephrase it, the insane top end that I've played. Different ratios of your Dark Masters. Again, I just like the black and purple because they give you Zwarts, and I love Zwart. I want more of him. I'd play a billion Zwart if I could. Some people don't play as many aces as I do. I think that's where the deck kind of shines the most. It puts it in a very strong niche that is really hard to deal with in the current meta. But I have tested out some more insane options. I've tested out Leviah and Leviah X for a little bit, and that was kind of nice. Leviah Mon deleting 2 pretty consistently, and then Leviah X if they ever play by effect, and it's a double checker into a triple checker that for free, which is nice. Some tamer hate. I've tried out Shadow Serafi, which feels a little slow, only really good on Wise because it gives a blocker as well, so that way you can kind of make use of the big body. And I get certain decks, I mean, giving them 6 memory and then, you know, getting just a guy out that by this point in the game, I was only playing 2 copies of him, so if I get him out, like, they'll probably have checked like 2 or 3 times already, so the on deletion won't do much, and they can kind of just go underneath a Digivolve twice. Like, it didn't feel fantastic. But I was playing him as well, trying to get even more value out of him with the new Chaos Dramon coming out in this set, and that was really cool. The new Chaos Dramon, I think I threw away the proxy version of the card that I had for him, so I'll just going off memory here. He is a DNA Digivolution on a black and yellow Digimon, so it was the Shadow Serafi plus almost any other of our aces. He had Partition for those 2, so you could skip the bad ace effect if they ever got rid of him. I think it was a minus 14,000 or minus 8,000 to one of your opponent's Digimon after Digivolving 3 times, I believe. No specific DNA Digivolution effect other than the Partition, which is something that I did try really hard to get consistently. You could technically go on top of him with the Valkmon as well, but I didn't have the Valkmon at the time. I still don't think it'd be fantastic, but like the idea was like, oh, I could Partition, get the Vikemon effect, and the Shadow Serafi back, which was super powerful. And so even if we got like the Valk and Vikemon, I mean, it's really cool in theory. The problem is the decks that we're already kind of having a hard time against are decks that bounce and strip sources, and that doesn't help us anymore. It doesn't deal with the current problems that we're seeing. Which is super unfortunate. And then end of your opponent's turn, both players trash security, like a little bit of aggression. It's like a pseudo double checker, but it also checks you once, which can be okay, but sometimes we're slow enough to die, and it feels kind of weird, but sometimes it's okay. Both those cards feel very meh. I think Chaos Shaman will probably see a little bit more success in Numemon. Not much. I think it's a okay card. I just don't think it has a very good spot in the current meta. And I think that the way that the aces have kind of taken over my love for some more powerful traditional Digimon like Leviamon has, I think, cemented this style of play, especially with how good Edamon is. God, I know I've been glazing Edamon. I've glazed like fucking every card in this deck. But if you guys have any suggestions or ideas or opinions on kind of what you think I maybe missed something, or you have a weird tech that you may see some success with, please let me know in the comments. I do read most, if not all of them, and I will try to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thank you guys so much for using your time for this video. I hope you have a wonderful day.